mali about yung ating postponement muna ng launch ng ating 5 to 11-year-old vaccination. Ang DHL, no, yung magdadaya ng mga bakuna, dapat ngayong gabi may bigay ng isang araw dahil sa mga logistical problems. Pero they assured us that the vaccines will arrive tomorrow.
You heard the country's COVID testing chief, Secretary Vince Dizon. He is confirming that the pediatric vaccination for kids aged 5 to 11 years old, which was supposed to start tomorrow, well, it's been deferred. Due to delivery delays of the Pfizer jabs for kids, the rollout has been moved to Monday next week.
But some parents of kids belonging to the said age group are not after just postponing the inoculation drive. They want to halt it completely. Petitioners are seeking a temporary restraining order against the rollout. But Dizon says pediatric vaccination will still continue.
We will wait for the decision of the courts. But if there is no TRO, then it is very important for us to vaccinate our children. No? Lalo na, nakita natin ng Omicron, maraming sa mga bata nahahawa. So kailangan proteksyon na natin ang mga kabataan natin. Responsibilidad ng gobyerno yan.
Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. While the Department of Health postpones its COVID-19 vaccination for children ages 5 to 11, a group is asking the court to stop the vaccine rollout altogether.
The DOH, however, assures parents that the vaccines are safe and that it is important to protect these children during the ongoing Omicron-led surge. JC Cosico has the big story.
Balloons and cartoon character displays are being prepared at the Phil Oil Flying V Center in San Juan City. But no, it's not for a children's party. This is part of the local government's effort to encourage kids 5 to 11 years old to get vaccinated.
Pakiramdam nila pumapasok sila sa isang children's party at ang ating layunin dito ay mawala ang kanilang atensyon sa karayom o sa mismong pagbabakuna at mapunta sa mga makikita nilang mga activities.
Over at Manila Zoo, kids who will get jabbed will get to roam around the park for free.
We hope to really encourage them na makapagbakuna dito and para makapag-banding, as in magkaroon ng ibang atmosphere, aura yung ating mga Pilipino.
But kids may have to wait longer to enjoy these perks. The supposed rollout of Pfizer jabs for the age group on Friday has been moved to Monday due to logistical issues.
Nakatanggap ang DOH ng email galing sa logistics provider, yung DHL, na nagkaroon ng konting aberya sa transport ng vaccines natin. So yung arrival nga na-postpone siya. From tonight, I think may naging problema sa aeroplano.
But some parents seek not just to delay it, but to halt pediatric COVID vaccination altogether. Petitioners Dominic Almelor and Girly Samonte have filed a petition asking the Quezon City Regional Trial Court to issue a temporary restraining order against the inoculation of 5 to 11 years old. They find the vaccine drive for the age group to be unconstitutional. They also contest the Health Department's memo which allows the state to inoculate minors who agree to get jabbed despite a parent's refusal. The Health Department and the Pandemic Task Force have already addressed the petition and said they will wait for the legal process to take its course.
Hanggat walang order ang korte, tutuloy natin kasi napaka-importante talaga na mabigyan na natin ang proteksyon ng ating mga kabataan.
The DOH also insists that it's important for children to receive their COVID-19 shots.
Omicron. Nakita ho natin tumaas po ang kaso ng mga 5 to 11 years old dahil sila po yung walang bakuna at sila po yung vulnerable.
For News 5, JC Cosico, We Are One News.
With the vaccination of children aged 5 to 11 seeing delays, how can government address vaccine concerns among parents? We have with us pediatric infectious disease specialist Dr. John Andrew Camposano. Good evening, Dr. Camposano. Welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening po.
Doc, let's start with what we know about the vaccine specifically for children, specifically for this age group, 5 to 11. What do we already know for certain in terms of safety and in terms of efficacy?
So based po on the data that was done by Pfizer for their vaccine and the data also gathered by the United States and based on the children that were given vaccines there starting last year, the vaccine is safe. So the side effects are minimal And in terms of weighing the risks versus the benefits clearly outweigh the risks. So the benefits include preventing infection, preventing severe disease, and also in a way, it helps us go back to what we have been doing before the pandemic, especially for the children.
You talk about going back to the time before the pandemic. We can even go back to the start of the pandemic. Marami na po kayong nakitang mga bata, nakatrabaho mga bata. Siyempre, marami rin kayong nakakasamang mga parents. At the start of this pandemic, we did have to deal with vaccine hesitancy among adults for themselves. Sa experience niyo po ba, talagang iba ba ang vaccine hesitancy when it comes to a parent trying to look out for their children? Iba ba yung fear for yourself? Iba ba yung fear for your own child?
Actually, siguro for every doctor, paiba-iba yung experience. Pero based on my experience, mas gusto ng mga parents pabakunahan yung mga bata kaysa sa pabakunahan yung sarili nila. Or yung mga lolo at lola, actually parang sila nga yung medyo mas may hesitancy kumpara sa ipapabakunahan na nila yung mga apo nila. That's my experience. Pero meron din syempre iba na parang mas gusto nilang protektahan yung mga the little ones. Pero I think the DOH has been doing a good job in terms of giving information and countering vaccine hesitancy in the country. And I think this has been shown in the increasing vaccine rates in the country. And as well as yung nakikita din natin na the success speaks for itself, that we have been able to decrease the numbers in the country, and the Omicron surge did not cripple the health system as much as in the previous surges, which can be attributed to vaccination.
Interesting po yung nabanggit nyo, yung mga lola, for that matter, the entire extended family, pati mga tito, mga tita. How does that come into play, especially with the culture of the Philippines, particularly if a household, yung parents ang ayaw, how can everybody else help each other to be convinced about this?
I think important po na kung sino man yung, syempre depende din sa family dynamics ng isang pamilya. Depende kung sino po yung main decision maker. Tapos kung meron po siyang mga doubts, pwede po siyang magtanong sa kanyang trusted na healthcare provider. Pwede po magtanong sa doktor nila, or for example, kung sa mga kababayan natin sa mga malalayong lugar, nandiyan naman po yung mga DOH personnel like midwives, BHWs na may knowledge din na pwede silang mag-share tungkol sa benefits ng vaccination. So, sino yung pinaka-main decision maker siguro sa pamilya, kung meron man siyang doubts, ask the health expert na kilala nila.
Okay, Doc, maraming salamat po. That was Dr. John Andrew Camposano, Pediatric Infectious Disease Specialist. While vaccination for kids 5 to 11 years old face challenges here in the United States, the age for COVID vaccination is getting younger and younger as regulators are now considering the first COVID vaccine for children under the age of 5. Pfizer and BioNTech SE have begun submitting data for emergency use authorization to the Food and Drug Administration. The companies are testing a 3 microgram dose of the vaccine for the very young children, a smaller dose compared to the 10 microgram dose given to 5 to 11-year-olds. Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines are safe for children and adolescents. That's according to the World Health Organization. Results of a study by the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts show Pfizer vaccine is safe for ages 5 and above. Moderna can be given to children above the age of 12. WHO says children and adolescents who are at high risk of severe COVID may be vaccinated alongside other priority groups.
These are the other big stories tonight. President Rodrigo Duterte is under quarantine after being exposed to a household staff that tested positive for COVID. 5 presidential candidates who will make their platforms known in KBP's Panata Sabayan Forum, save for frontrunner Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And while they're still World Cup bound, the historic run of the Philippines women's football team comes to an end as they bow to South Korea in the semifinals match of the AFC Women's Asian Cup. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. As parts of the country start to ease COVID restrictions, a private sector representative now wants booster shots to be an additional requirement before entering establishments.
But groups and experts are already thumbing down the proposal as vaccine coverage remains low. Mon Gualvez with the story.
Trade Department officials inspected various leisure establishments in a mall in Mandaluyong. This is after restrictions were loosened as Metro Manila reverted to Alert Level 2. The DTI inspected restaurants and leisure establishments.
Under Alert Level 2, people, vaccinated or not, can go out more freely just like in malls. But MMDA earlier clarifies that LGUs or establishments still have a say on whether or not they will require vaccination cards upon entry.
Some establishments are still being cautious.
Sa amin po, hindi pa rin po namin na-allowed hanggat hindi po siya fully vaccinated. Basta fully vaccinated po yung bata, allowed po namin.
The DTI agrees that vaccine cards should still be a requirement in establishments to ensure safety. But while the issue and vaccine card requirement is still being debated, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion recommends having booster shots as an additional requirement in establishments.
To me, that should be a minimum health protocol, even without alert levels, because it will remind us to take our vaccination on a regular basis or our booster on a regular basis.
But a labor group opposes this.
Marami sa mga manggagawa ang first dose pa lang sa vaccines. Mas maraming mga manggagawa ang walang access sa booster shots.
Employees and officials meanwhile are divided on the issue.
Kailangan sir para hindi lang sa sarili mo, kasi para sa family mo din as well. Safety mo at para yung customer mo din, safe din sila.
Parang ayoko pa kasi baka ma-overdose kasi tayo kasi nakadalawang turok tas additional na naman.
Infectious disease specialist Edsel Salvania isn't keen on this proposal, noting that many Filipinos have yet to complete their primary doses.
Marami pa rin namang hindi na bibigyan ng unang course nung vaccination, tinatawag natin na primary series. So I think na mahirap gawin yon kasi masyadong maraming tao ang hindi pa natin nabuboost.
As of February 1, 7.5 million people have been jabbed with boosters, 2.1 million of which are from NCR. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
President Rodrigo Duterte is now under quarantine after being exposed to a household staff who tested positive for COVID-19. Acting presidential spokesperson Carlo Nograles says President Duterte was tested for COVID twice after being exposed last January 30. Both tests did come back negative. President Duterte has been vaccinated with Sinopharm and already received his booster shot. As to the rumored sightings of Duterte at Cardinal Santos Medical Center in San Juan, Nograles says the president went to the hospital for his routine medical checkup.
These are the election-related stories we're watching. Vice President Leni Robredo is the biggest victim of negative disinformation on social media. That's according to fact-checking project Check.ph. Speaking before the Senate, the group says that every week, Robredo has been at the receiving end of negative messaging involving all sorts of things, from typhoons to COVID-19. Meanwhile, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is the top beneficiary of positive but misleading posts online. Check.ph reports the content about former Senator Marcos include false endorsements and historical inaccuracies. Robredo, meanwhile, in an interview on DZRH, rejected the idea of having unification talks with Marcos Jr., saying the discussion should always be based on justice and that Marcos has yet to acknowledge the human rights abuses during his father's dictatorial regime.
Just before adjourning for the elections, Congress has rushed to ratify one of the bills President Duterte had deemed urgent, one that will open up key industries to foreigners. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez has this story.
The bill allowing full foreign ownership in key industries is now awaiting President Duterte's signature. Congress ratified the amendments to the 85-year-old Public Service Act on Wednesday. When signed into law, the bill will open up industries such as airlines, expressways, railways, airports, shipping, and telcos. Senator Grace Poe, the bill's sponsor, said this will help the country recover from the pandemic.
It will also make our country competitive when it comes to attracting foreign investments. We are confident that our economy, which is lagging even behind our ASEAN neighbors, will thrive and grow.
There has been fierce opposition to the plan, particularly from party list groups Bayan Muna and Gabriela Women's Party.
Humaling na humaling ang mga economic managers sa dayuhang pamumuhunan na tila ito ang liligtas sa ating pagkabulusok at atrasadong ekonomiya ng ating bansa.
But Poe insisted it doesn't mean foreigners can now take advantage.
Adequate safeguards and security provisions are in place to protect our national security and sovereignty. The President may suspend or prohibit any proposed merger or acquisition transaction or any investment in a public service that results in the grant of control to a foreigner or a foreign corporation.
Poe was referring to a provision barring state-owned firms from owning capital in critical industries. House Ways and Means Committee Chair Joey Salceda said this will lead to massive job creation and investments. Both Senate and Congress have now adjourned and will only resume their session after the elections. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
New year, new face. News 5 Headlines 2022 with another veteran journalist joining its roster. News anchor Julius Babao formally makes his kapatid debut on Frontline Pilipinas, where he will reunite with former ABS-CBN colleague Cheryl Cosim.
Sobrang saya ko at sobrang excited ko. Looking forward to what's going to happen.
Babao brings with him 30 years of experience in the industry, a welcome addition as News 5 gears up for its election coverage.
We have to make sure that we protect our credibility, our integrity, para sa panahon na tayo ay nagsalita, hindi tayo magbumukhang meron tayong agenda.
TV5 President and CEO Robert P. Galang assured that Frontline is just the first of many projects lined up for the new kapatid.
And we're excited that Julius will bring his own personal brand of journalism, no? Kaya very welcome na addition to the News 5 team of very credible and professional journalists.
Viewers can catch Julius Babao on Frontline Pilipinas starting February 7. For News 5, MJ Marfori, We Are One News.
Time for another quick break. When we return, we are just hours away from the face-off of presidential hopefuls. Save for one, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. declined the KBP's invitation. A disappointing loss for Team Philippines as they bow to South Korea in the semifinals football match of the AFC Women's Asian Cup. And a winning save by two dogs in Masbate. Find out more about our pet heroes after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. For the first time since the filing of the COCs, 5 presidential aspirants joined the press in an important forum to talk about their plans for the country.
But one Zoom screen will be left blank as frontrunner and former Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has declined the invitation. Marian Enriquez with this report.
For the first time, presidential hopefuls will face each other in Panata, Sabayan. All top bets, save for one, confirmed their attendance in the forum organized by the Kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas, the country's biggest news organizations. Calio de Guzman, Senator Ping Lacson, Senator Manny Pacquiao, Manila City Mayor Isko Moreno, and Vice President Leni Robredo vowed to attend. As for former Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he declined the invitation as early as January 19 due to a conflict in schedule.
Of course, we're hoping also na mag-change yung mind nila. At nagpadala pa kami ng second letter. So, ganon. But yung siguro, decision nila talaga is not to attend. Pero okay lang, we respect that decision of former Senator Bongbong Marcos.
But when his camp was asked about his schedule, his spokesperson said,
Basta't meron kami schedule, I cannot reveal to you yung mga schedules namin. And alam naman ninyo yan, pagka merong sorties, nasasabihan din naman namin kayo.
As a result, Marcos trended on Twitter. Hashtags babak out muli, Marcos Duwag, Marcos Jr., and Marcos Sinungaling took over the country's top topics. His camp believes his absence will not affect his survey ratings.
Mas gusto ng tao, in our humble assessment, mas na-appreciate ng tao yung 1-hour program na one-on-one. Kasi mas maraming natatanong yung interviewer.
While not mandatory, the KBP says these events are great opportunities for candidates.
So malaking platform talaga siya na marinig yung mga kuro-kuro, yung mga plataforma.
For some political analysts, however, Marcos Jr. skipping the interviews may be some kind of a tactic.
As soon as there was a presidential debate, the numbers seemed to adjust.
For its part, the COMELEC warns inattendance may be a red flag.
O dahil isang din the media exposure. Ikalawa, sigurado everybody else will gang up on him.
It's very important that in recognition of how important it is to the people, that we acknowledge that they failed to show up.
The Panata Sabayan Presidential Candidates Forum will air 9 a.m. tomorrow. A primer before the forum will also air at 8:30 a.m. with Marisol Halili and Ed Lingao. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Here are the other big stories around the globe. Major U.S. airlines, businesses, and travel groups are urging the White House to do away with its pre-departure travel restrictions. Companies like Airlines for America, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the U.S. Travel Association say pre-departure testing discourages international travel. The U.S. requires travelers to show a negative COVID-19 test 1 day before departure, as opposed to the original 3 days. Action star Jackie Chan carried the Olympic torch atop the Great Wall on the second day of the torch relay for the Beijing Winter Olympics. The 67-year-old Hong Kong action star ran at the Badaling section of the Great Wall in a chilly -11-degree morning.
For the big story in sports, the Philippine women's football team bows out of the 2022 AFC Women's Asian Cup after falling to South Korea 2-0. It was a perfect start for South Korea as they scored their first goal in the 4th minute. The world number 18 squad then continued to pressure the Philippines as they once again scored in the 34th minute. While the Filipinas had their chances in the second half, ultimately they just couldn't convert. Despite the loss, the Philippines maintains its slot in the FIFA World Cup in 2023 after beating Chinese Taipei on Sunday.
And we call them Bantay for a reason. 2 dogs in Masbate win the hearts of people online for heroically stopping a robbery.
Meet Smile and Roscoe. Pet owner Trisha Marie Buri says it was past midnight when Smile started barking. Trisha then heard a bag being opened and she started to scream, waking up her parents. Smile and Roscoe continued to bark downstairs.
When Trisha's father went to check what was going on, everything seemed fine, but the dogs would not be fooled. They continued to bark until Trisha's father found the thief hiding under the sink. With the help of the barangay, the suspect was arrested and they were able to recover a pair of shades and a smartphone. The Buri family could not thank their dogs enough for their heroic act, so much so that they even gave them a certificate of recognition.
Namiss ko tuloy aso ko. Oo. Speaking of bantay sa boto kayo bukas. Alam na natin yung attendance, 5 out of 6. But what can we expect from the Presidential Forum?
Well, marami. Siyempre, makakaharap natin sila at we will give each of the candidates enough time to answer some national issues, some questions about character also. Pero mahalaga rin po emphasize, KBP po to. Which means yung mga chapter ng KBP from around the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao will also get to ask important issues relevant to the regions and the provinces.
Ako, exciting yan. Abangan natin yan. Tomorrow,
9
a.m.
9 a.m. hanggang 12.
And then a primer by Ed Lingao and Marisol Halili right before that.
That's right.
All right. Make sure to wake up early. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.